On today. Nice to see some familiar faces out there. Oops, let me get back. Everybody ready for the return of these magnificent birds, our swallowtail kites? I think I am. Always excited. I'm going to share a bit about our research that we've been doing on swallowtail kites and show you how important their community structure is. A lot of their life cycle involves being around other swallowtail kites. A little bit about me and ARCI. We're a nonprofit based in Gainesville. I've been working with them now over 20 years, which is amazing. So I answered a job ad to do 2 months of short-tailed hawk nest searching in Central Florida, and I've stayed now over 20 years. So I got hooked on Florida. I got hooked on the birds, the variety of different habitat types, and just the passion and things that I get to do in this position that have kept me right here. It's hard work. It's rewarding work. Blood, sweat, and tears of all sorts. I grew up in Wisconsin, went to University of Stevens Point, and then did my master's on swallowtail kite research at Georgia Southern University. So, and I did the graduate work like in the middle of those 20 years. So I had a field season or two, and then I did graduate work with data that we are collecting with ARCI. So our goal and our niche is to do research on rare and imperiled species within Florida and throughout the Southeast, technically, because the swallowtail kites are, I'll show you a map here, but they're breeding in the Southeastern United States. And we collaborate with a lot of folks across their range and do our own work in South Carolina and Georgia as well. And then since these birds and a lot of the other species we track and do research on are migratory, whether it's the Caribbean or Central and South America, we have a lot of partners in those places too. So let's thank a bunch of people that have helped us most recently with our swallowtail kite research. Swallowtail kites are not endangered or threatened in Florida. They are, their range has contracted since the early 1920s or 1940s. And they haven't bounced back to their original range. So they are a species of interest just to keep track of, but really Florida is the stronghold of the whole US population. Probably 2/3 of the US population lives in Florida. But so we've had help with the agencies, Florida Fish and Wildlife and US Fish and Wildlife, but since they're not an endangered species, a lot of funds are funneled to those species with a little more conservation need. And so we rely on all these different groups. We've had help with our recent tracking and monitoring studies from bird clubs and Audubon societies and a lot of zoos and nature groups. So we're very thankful to a great variety of people. And as I was saying, swallowtail kites used to nest all the way up to Mississippi. They were along the Mississippi River, using those floodplains. And after the 1940s, there was a lot of logging and even some persecution and egg collecting that had dwindled their nesting range. So currently, they are nesting within parts of 7 South eastern states. This map is a little dated, and I would connect all the red areas here. So they do nest in the coastal areas of Georgia and South Carolina, and now just up into North Carolina, they're starting to see some nesting just over the border there. So we have learned a lot about swallowtail kites through the use of remote tracking. First, it was satellite transmitters like the one you see here. And you can see on the back, I don't know if my cursor is in your view, but there's a solar panel that recharges the battery here. So we have the ability for these transmitters to last 5 and up to 7 years. We've had a bird giving us phenomenal data of lat-long locations, very accurate GPS locations with a date and time stamp for 7 years straight. And it's a tool that has become very useful in learning all the things we need to know about the swallowtail kite. I say all the things. There's always, as you learn more, you have more questions. And, the information we get, we are trying to protect the places that they need, make sure they're nesting and they're roosting, their migration and wintering destinations are, okay still for them to get to every year and continue to thrive and make more kites in the following year. So we've captured birds and put these tracking devices on them. On the nesting grounds, we catch adult birds, and you can see here I'm just about to hood the bird to calm it down through the tagging process. And we do this as quick and safely as possible for the bird. And so the whole process takes about 40 minutes to put the transmitter on. We take very good care. It's fitted exactly to that bird. So the tightness has to be perfect, not too tight that it would rub on any part or constrict the movements in any way, and then not loose enough that it's going to flip or they could get a beak or their foot caught in it. So we take very good care to make sure that's perfect, because these birds could be giving us this data and carrying this package, which they're taking one for the team really, for up to 7 years. So we want to make sure it's perfect, and that's what takes a little more time. So with our satellite data and our GPS remote locations, we can see how much time these birds spend in various parts of their annual cycle. Oh, let me get back to that. Okay. So take a look here. In the summer, when they're in the United States, when we get to see them, that's only 38% of their year. They take a long time. Then during their fall migration, they're just kind of on vacation, taking their time to their wintering destination, which is another chunk of their life cycle. But then once spring turns around, like end of January, they book it back to their breeding areas much faster. They've got one track mind. They want to get to a nesting territory and start having babies. And so they want to claim a territory, get back, get the best places. So they're anxious to return. So what makes swallowtail kites communal? If you think of raptors, you think of a red-shouldered hawk or a red-tailed hawk, and they are loners. They don't want other birds of their kind anywhere near their nesting area. But swallowtail kites are different, and you can see in their foraging and their nesting and then their roost sites throughout their life cycle that they are in groups. One of the things is since swallowtail kites' main diet is insects, they have to find a lot of insects. And often insects are hatching in a place where they, there might be an ephemeral burst of insect hatching that might be over a melon field or some marsh, and though that black and white pattern may attract the other birds to these areas so they can find food at the same time. So they use each other to find food sources. And here's an example of a bunch of birds flying within an insect swarm, and all happily minding their business, and no one's chasing anyone. They just there's enough food to share and to go around, and they use each other to find these places. And then they nest close to each other. Often you'll find single nests here and there, but if you are on the hunt for a nesting area, keep your ear out and your eye out for more birds that might be nesting nearby. And when I say nearby, the closest tree nest tree to one another that I've ever seen was about 70 meters. So close, but not like in the same tree or next to it. But then I also consider close as maybe a kilometer apart. So those birds that are within a kilometer may come together and roost together at night. So a little bit about their nests. They nest at the tops of tall trees, like the tallest trees within a stand, or a tree that's kind of offset from the others, because they need a little runway to get in and out of that nest. As graceful and lovely as a swallowtail kite is on the wing, it's a little klutzy when it comes into a tight space for a nest. So it wants a kind of a pathway to zip in and out to get to the chicks. A swallowtail kite nest will always have Spanish moss, here in Florida at least. Often old man's beard lichen as well, but it just looks like a puff of Spanish moss. Look at how teeny tiny those feet are on the adult. They can't pick up big sticks like you'd see osprey or even a red shoulder, red tail. So they use smaller sticks and then kind of glue it all together with Spanish moss. So that's kind of the little princess and the pea nest situation you're seeing here. A quick shout out to photographers that have been so grateful for letting us use their pictures in our talk. Max Stone, if you know him, fantastic conservation photographer, and we've worked on a few studies together with him with swallowtail kites. So I thank him so much for his beautiful photos that I get to share. And like I was saying, the swallowtail kites will then roost together in a neighborhood situation. So say there were 3 or 4 nests within a kilometer of each other. They might have a favorite place where they go to rest each night. And so if you think about it, during the nesting cycle, some bird would be incubating over eggs at night, and then the other one would be off of the nest. So these are those extra birds that aren't incubating or brooding small chicks. But then as the chicks get older, both adults join the neighborhood roost as well. And they'll fight an alarm call if there's predators around. They'll chase owls away, and then again go find food sources together as well. Owls. The great horned owl is swallowtail kite's greatest predator. They will eat the adults right there in the nest, and of course chicks and any eggs that are left in the nest. So this is something we've been monitoring, is great horned owl depredation at swallowtail kite nests. And we're working with a colleague, Jennifer Coulson in Louisiana, who has been doing genetics on piles of feathers just like this. So, typical season, we might be monitoring a handful of nests, and then we come to a pile of feathers. These were like gathered together, but sometimes they sit right there on the top of the nest and pluck the feathers off of an adult, and they all flutter to the ground. And yeah, that's the end of that. So it's quite a sad scene. And, you know, since these birds are nesting in neighborhoods, this owl has a search image to go from nest to nest. And each night it may disturb, kill, or you know, eat and kill the adult that has been incubating or breeding there at night. I show this picture in the background. It's actually timber company land. We find a lot of swallowtail kites compatible using nesting in commercial timber properties, because there's a lot of, you know, those edges, and sometimes they do selective cuts where they clear a few lines of trees, and so some of the emerging trees in those next lines of trees, they'll be taller and appropriate for nesting. So we've been working with timber companies to develop management plans for certain properties, which is real great. And when those great horned owls come into the nests or into these neighborhoods, they may take out the adult that is nesting on there. And with our radio telemetry data and our remote satellite and GSM, GPS data, we know that females typically brood or incubate at night, like 80% of the time. So not only are these owls coming in and eating birds, adults or chicks, but they're taking out a lot of breeding age females, which is something to keep track of. So I love a great horned owl, but they are the lions of the sky, and they will eat anything they want. And I just cross my fingers each year that they don't find all the swallowtail kites. And luckily they don't. We have plenty that are doing okay in Florida. So something we have done is a bit of an experiment. Since swallowtail kites are attracted to other swallowtail kites, we made our own decoys. This was a crow, hacked off the bill, added a little hook, painted it up a bit, added tail extensions here, just like a neoprene tail. And we can put these out and try to encourage kites to go to different areas. So it started with the timber companies. We knew that they wanted to cut certain stands of trees where swallowtail kites were nesting nearby, or even within those stands. So we thought, well, if we find out an area where the timber companies aren't going to be harvesting, but it's close by and the trees look appropriate, can we attract them to these areas? So we built our own nests. This is a nest eye view of a swallowtail kite nest that I built. We start with this little landscape grating. It's like a plastic chicken wire, and weave small sticks in it, just like swallowtail kites size sticks for their feet, and then just wrap it with a bunch of Spanish moss. Find an appropriate tree. I would climb up and then haul that bag, or my partner on the ground would haul the bag up to me, and I would basically zip tie it to the crotch, the highest place, and maybe pull some of the branches out so I could see a good runway where the birds could come in and out, and then fill it in with more sticks and a little more Spanish moss. And this is considered like a nest start. I didn't, you know, if the birds took one look to maybe consider nesting here, I thought it was a success. But the good thing is that we have had birds actually use our nest platforms or use platforms nearby. So yeah, just really neat. I mean, it's a lot of effort, but just kind of neat to know that in certain cases, maybe that would work for swallowtail kites. And then those decoys, we would put at least 200 meters away. So, you know, they want to be by other kites. So if they see that nest platform, they see other kites farther away than, you know, not within that little area of the nest start, we might hope that they think it's a safe place to come and start a nest. So here's one of these things is not like the other. If you see the bottom kite, it's actually one of our decoys, and these kites are really giving it a hard look, knowing that something is different. So here's proof too that these guys, they took to a fake kite, very curious, but they so they are attracted, and this was kind of one of our experiments to see if we might make them roost in different trees too. So back to telemetry. This transmitter you're seeing is a GSM transmitter, which connects with the global cell phone tower network. So it doesn't matter what plan or where in the world, there's a big network that these transmitters can connect to upload data. So that's another solar panel on the back of the transmitter, and then when we release them, this is the kind of data we are able to get. So you're going to see a few maps like this. Each line is a different bird, all different colors. And you can see those dots are the GPS location that those birds that are traveling spend time in. Well, it's actually, they could be moving at that time, and it's just in those hour or 2 hour increments where the GPS location was taken. So we can kind of look at where the lines converge or where there's more time where birds are spending. So I kind of gaze at this little section. There's a lot of different colored dots here and lines. And so we might go to these places, especially after the breeding season, so these are migration pathways going through from North Florida through to the south as they move south through the peninsula. And we might go to these places and see if there's groups of roosting birds. And we might fly over and find a group of birds early in the morning, and by looking with by flying in a small fixed wing airplane, we can fly high enough not to scare the birds and early enough that the birds aren't getting up and flying out. So this is like first thing in the morning, and we may see something like this. So this is a group of 900 swallowtail kites that was found exactly this way. So we saw repeated use at a specific place during the night, and a couple birds were using this area. Even some use them for a shorter time or longer time, but this is a group of pre-migration communal roosting kites. So after the nest season and when they're getting ready for migration, these birds gather up in these commonly used areas, and they go to these areas each year. So they're very important. So this gives us a fantastic tool to keep track of the US population over time, since many of the birds from throughout the US range are coming through Florida in late July, is when these areas peak. we can fly over these areas, like I said, early in the morning without disturbing the birds. And before the birds get up naturally, take pictures of them all and then count the bird heads in the pictures. And then we know of 12, at least 12 different historically used places where the kites are doing this. Now, 4 of those places have over 1,000 birds in them. And they're so valuable for these birds because it's just like a network of learning for young ones and old alike, because they've been coming back to these places and they know they're safe for them to rest and then find good food sources from these places where they can fatten up for the migration ahead. So last year was a challenging year. We didn't get the funds to do much of our roost surveys because the Palm Beach Zoo had been supporting us in the last few years, but because they had no revenue from people coming to the park because of COVID, we scaled back with some great private donations, but all in all, we were able to get to all of the roosts, just not do the find out when the peak time of the roosting was. This year seemed to be maybe a bit fewer kites with across all roosts, but that could have been due to our the different effort that we gave it this year too. But 10,000 kites, and that number includes citizen scientist reports. So if you've seen our studies before, we do a shout out at the end of July to get swallowtail kite observations from people like you, from anyone out there who can see kites in a window of time, the last 2 weeks basically of July. And we can add those numbers to our roost numbers, and we get just about 10,000 birds. So it's great to have those extra eyes out there, because not all swallowtail kites are using these roosts at the same time. Some of them are still in their neighborhood roosts or small little places along the way where there's gatherings. But we're learning about new places through citizens' eyes as well. So we rely on all those people being our eyes out there. And this is what they're doing. They're going to find foraging areas. So from above, here's a group of swallowtail kites foraging over a field, getting fat, so they are ready to migrate. Like I said, these places are so critical for them to get ready for that migration. And we've got to be sure that they are safe places for them, and they're going to perpetuate year after year. So there are some places along rivers and lakes. They do like to be close to water often during these big roosting congregations. And we are concerned about people disturbing them, getting too close to them, and perhaps, making them have to find new places to roost. So it's critical that they have these safe places to be while they are preparing for migration. And we have seen changes in some of the places where maybe they get disturbed with fishing activities and even some photography getting in there, and kayakers and frog gigging at night. So that's critical that these places are protected so the kites can be have those energy storages to make their big migration after they leave these places. Another roost site was disturbed by spraying for water control, clearing these areas. We learned we had gone to one of these big migration roosts from the air like we would every year, and we couldn't find the birds in places where they had been the former 5 years. And one of the flights, we found this helicopter spraying. Now the birds you're seeing in the picture are white ibis, but perhaps this is what happened to the kites too. They were scared away by spraying to control the vegetation to open up this area for duck hunting. It was a private parcel right within protected land, but you know, could most likely very innocent, just bad timing, time of day, and time of year as well. So the birds have left this area. It took us a while to find a big group of swallowtail kites again, and we think we found them about 30 miles to the south in another protected area that shouldn't be sprayed for any vegetation control. So this is what the birds are getting ready to do, this giant migration, 5,000 miles or more to get to their wintering destinations in mostly Brazil, but Bolivia and Paraguay as well. So again, each color is a different bird on their southbound migration for this picture. Last year was crazy as far as a southbound migration. We're ready for the worst on northbound migration because often there are strong winds that are coming from the north across the Gulf, like winter cold fronts that push kites south. And so we've had issues with birds returning to the US and facing issues when they cross the Gulf of Mexico. You know, raptors don't like to cross water, and swallowtail kites, you know, take the narrowest path they can. So they go to the tip of Florida, often leading like south of Marco in the 10,000 island area. Some of them go to Cuba, and some of them bypass completely, and their goal is to get to the Yucatan Peninsula. That's like the regular route for them to head straight to the Yucatan. But you know, they are creatures of the wind and they get blown off course a lot. So you can see, let's just follow this red path. This was a bird tagged in Sanibel. First, it did its pre-migration all the way up to the Georgia border, and then came back down, and then it left from 10,000 islands, bypassed Cuba, and had this strong tailwind. It couldn't, you know, it really can't fight. I mean, they're not like a peregrine that can flap their way across the Gulf. They really have to just glide with the wind. And got almost to Texas and did this curly Q maneuver, and then straight north to Texas. Almost made it to Mexico, but did this whole thing. That was 5 days over water. We have never, ever seen a bird survive that long over ocean. So the good thing is it had the proper fat reserves leaving Florida. So it must have been a fatty fat bird, and you can see it recuperated here. This was like a 2-week span of time, this red area, and then started figuring it out and made its way south. And then a week after that, we had birds, just 2 more birds try to cross the Gulf of Mexico in the same situation. And just unfortunately here, this purple bird was within what was it, 20 miles of the Mexican coast, and we lost its signal. So that was very unfortunate. Strong winds just pushing birds due west, which we'd not seen before. So it was a very odd migration south, something we haven't seen. And you know, we wouldn't know this if we hadn't had tracks of so many birds prior to this. So these are things we're going to be looking at, comparing migration routes, and over time since 1996 was when Ken Meyer, my boss, started tracking swallowtail kites on the southbound migration. So we've got some really great comparison time frame to put this all together for the whole migration, and timing coming north and leaving, all those things we can look at over time. In South Florida, just a core places where we've had wintering birds. And here we have 4 different colors, and all of these birds are in, this is the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, Brazil, and Campo Grande is the capital there, and these birds were just east and south of this place. So the area is like Cerrado, it's like savanna, and there's lots of rivers, and it's very similar to Florida actually. So they're on cattle ranches and these winding river areas, and they're eating insects. But I just put this in South Carolina, Jacksonville, and Louisiana. All 4 of these birds came to the exact same roost locations. You know, they're nesting over 700 miles apart from each other, and they found them all together in these same places in South America. So, you know, and I think of how many other kites are with them. You know, these are just the ones we have in the population that are radio tagged. So they're gathering in big groups down there as well. And so roosting together and then foraging together. So this is an aerial shot. We came down to look for some of our radio tag birds in Brazil, and check out some of the the roost sites, and talk to the family farmers down there. And they are eating insects like crazy as well in big groups down there. There are termites that are, you can see those little brown baubles, the little brown hills, throughout the pasture there. And there's a flighted stage of termite where they disperse and they have wings and they fly out, and they're big, juicy, chunky things, and they're klutzy and slow, but man, the swallowtail kite just gobble that up. So that's a big, rich food source for them down there. And this is one place where we had a lot of our GPS locations from some of these trees just down here. So we flew over and we didn't see birds from the air. And then we found the farmer when we were down there to get on the property and say, hey, so did you see the swallowtail kites? Like, oh yeah, they left a week ago. And so these birds kind of move through the landscape. I mean, like 100 miles, they kind of feed over here for a little while, and then they go 30 miles to the east. And then, so they're not always every single day coming back to the same roosting area. They're kind of spreading out and finding other little food sources. But if you think about it, if they eat all the insects in one area, they're going to have to find other areas with hatching insects too. So we got to the base of those trees, and my colleague here, Emily, Toriana Mora, she and I collected feathers. Now, you'd think, oh my gosh, somebody's been shooting swallowtail kites and all their feathers are plucked, but they are molting and they're switching all their feathers. So these are straight up molted feather. I mean, that is a ton. It's like, wow, they have been here. They spent a lot of time just under these or above in the trees here. It was pretty amazing. But those properties, those beautiful farmlands that are compatible for swallowtail kites, are converting to large scale agriculture like this. So soybean and sugarcane are the big hitters down there. So it's real sad because it's monoculture, or there's zero trees. It's like edge to edge vegetationless monoculture with a lot of pesticides. So, the birds might be eating things that are getting them sick. So this is something we're really watching and really concerned, because swallowtail kites should be on vacation and relaxing while they're on their wintering range. But these are some of the things that they're challenges for them. So as of a couple days ago, we do have one of our tagged birds coming north. That is PBC, which stands for Palm Beach County Environmental Resource Management. PBC male started north on the 24th of January. It starts with a J. And so it's right on time. That's our regular northbound kind of start. Within the last couple weeks of January is when we start seeing birds head north. And the rest we are still waiting on to either give us a signal or turn north. So a lot of these birds, most all of them, have GSM transmitters, which are tracked by cell phones. So if you think about it, there's not cell phone coverage across the Amazon or even the Andes Mountains or the oceans and things like that. So we get radio silence for a long time. And these three birds here, we haven't heard from in a long time, just crossing our fingers that they found a great spot to winter. And as they turn around, we'll start getting their signal again. And what's great about these transmitters, they'll store all of the location data while they're in radio silence, and then they'll dump it all to the airwaves, and we'll get the readouts of where these birds have been hanging out. Also, some of these birds are coming to the end of their transmitter time. The batteries can only last so long. So we're expecting some of them we may not hear from again. But the good thing is we can get to their breeding areas and look for them on the breeding territories to see if we spot the transmitter on the birds. So just to recap now, we mentioned the foraging aggregations. This happens all year round across their range, and then that they are roosting in places together, especially pre-migration, which is probably the most important as they get ready for migration, to have these well-known places to go and be safe and find food together. And then nesting neighborhoods, of course, are scattered about, and they help defend nest areas together as a group as well. Just a couple things I wanted to point out. Max Stone worked with us on this dual article that came out in Biographic. I don't know if you guys have ever checked that out. It's California Science this is an online pictographic magazine only, which just has fantastic pictures, as well as Audubon. So it was a dual article, same text across both of these, but the photos are different. There's some video as well. So I encourage you to check out A Perilous Perch in Biographic. And then in Audubon, it's Secret Lives of Swallowtail Kites. So it's about the mostly nesting behavior or nesting biology of swallowtail kites. And then going further, you can help us and help the kites through ARCI's website. If you feel it in your hearts to give a donation to our tracking and monitoring program, we've got a very safe and secure way to do that in our donation button online. We are doing a blog on swallowtail kite migration and some of the other species we're studying through our website, as well as, and we'll alert you to those through Facebook. We're on there as well. We would love to get your sighting reports on swallowtail kites and other species that we're studying. I'll show you a little bit about that. And we're doing a pilot study called Eyes on Kites, which is a nest watching program. So we have an upgraded website, which is still in the process of getting pretty with more pictures and such. But this is our web address. And up here, you can see the Get Involved button, and that will show you where to enter your sighting reports, as well as the Eyes on Kites information will be there. We're still working on that, so that will be coming soon. The sighting report form is very simple. There'll be a map and you can put your location of where you saw, but this drop-down menu here will have various species that we are studying and interested of where you're seeing those, and then information about the behavior of the bird, and you know, if you're close to a nest area or something like that, we'll ask for more information as well. Here's a little snippet of that Eyes on Kites site. So we have a lot of information on how to monitor and even find swallowtail kite nests, and you know, do it safely for the birds, and get the information that can help us help kites. Some of the other species we've been working on in Florida include familiar rarities, and we're out there in the field these days. Right now, it's there's 2 of us full time, my boss and I, and we're running all over the state, and it's great. We take volunteers and sometimes interns, and when possible, we have positions for technicians to help us out on specific projects. So I will make sure to alert people to volunteer opportunities and any jobs coming up in the near future. And with that, I thank you so much for being a great audience. It's so hard not seeing all your faces and getting those comments right away, which I wish we could soon be in person and share our kite stories, because I know if you are here today, you like swallowtail kites. So I appreciate it. I think we have some time for questions, right, Mary Keith?
Yes, definitely. And I have been making notes. We've got 4 or 5 questions here that came in the in the chat box. I'll pass those along, and then if anybody else has other questions, please go ahead and add in. And I will say I've been monitoring a kite nest at Hillsborough River State Park for 3 years now, and it is so much fun. I happened to be there one day, the day that the chicks actually left the nest, see the first flight, and they were still creamy on the front.
Yeah.
That was great, but I have not yet, I have tried and tried and tried and have not yet found any other nest in that vicinity. I'm sure there are because there's 6, 8 other kites there, but I have not found the nest. Okay, so some questions, and you may have answered them, but these came in the chat box, so I will pass them on anyway. Where do they leave from? And I think it meant from South America, where do they leave from?
When they head south, well, I'll answer it. Let's see. So when they head south, many kites leave from the 10,000 Islands area. So Marco Island and south, over the Keys, or out even Cape Sable of the Everglades. And then their goal is to get to the Yucatan Peninsula. Then everything else is overland if they make it there safely. When they're coming north, they all come up into the Yucatan Peninsula and wait for good winds and good migration conditions before heading across the ocean, which then they could be out there and the winds change, and so it's risky.
Okay, the next question that came in is, what's the lifespan?
Yeah. We get this all the time. We only tag adult birds, and we've been monitoring a bird 10 years. So it was at least 3 years when we tagged it the first time. Then we caught it and then put another transmitter on that lasted 7 years. So in the wild, they're going to be they have a shorter lifespan than, say, a captive bird, but probably 15 to 20 years would be a really old kite. So I would say if they live past their first year, that's the trickiest time. Then they could live perhaps to 15 to 20 if they're lucky.
Good long birds. The next question is, do they reuse the nests?
They do often, but not always, especially if it's a successful nest. The pair often come back to the nest site, and for whatever reason, they might choose to use that exact nest, or maybe even a tree right next to it, or, within 100 meters or 200 meters. So knowing where kites nested in the past can help you find them in the future. They'll often use that same nest tree.
Yeah, I would say the nest that I've been watching in Hillsborough River, it's been in the same tree for at least 3 years.
Yay, that's cool.
Yeah, I just happened to see them mating in one tree, and so I thought, ooh, this is interesting. So then I went back fairly regularly and found the nest 50 yards away, maybe, in a different tree, but it's been there for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question was, what's being done to protect the roosts and the nesting areas here in Florida?
Yeah, I mean, it's individual landowners. A lot of swallowtail kite nests are on private properties. Mary mentioned finding one in the state park, and that's also a likely place, but you know, they are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act as a nesting bird. You're not supposed to bother them, harass them, make them, force them to lose their nest site or whatever. But, regulations are getting weaker and weaker. And, enforcement of them is just as tricky. So, um, it's kind of up to the property owners to protect these places. Thankfully, the roosts are the big roosts, at least, are on protected land, but again, there's some access, and people might disturb the birds. So whether, you know, mostly unintentionally, but if there's boats going by and things like that, it's something we gotta just be wary on. And if, I mean, there's certain protections that we can try to get more enforcement. Designate places as critical wildlife areas with signage and limits and things like that. So that might be the next step.
I know up at Hillsborough River, the rangers there are really good. I was out there one time and some people went past with a drone pack
Oh,
on their back. And so I called the front gate, and within, I guess, 15 minutes, there were a couple of rangers on an ATV bouncing along, looking for them.
that's good.
So the
Yeah.
rangers were very, very responsive that way.
Yeah, drones are bad news for raptors, especially because they look at that thing as a threat. That is a raptor basically coming into their nest. So no drones, no
Yeah.
drones around raptors.
Yeah. And then the last question that came in here is, how do you catch them to attach the transmitter?
That's a good question. So you saw that I mentioned that great horned owls are a threat to them, and they are very defensive around great horned owls. So we have figured out a way to use a captive, rehabilitated great horned owl trained, that we sit on a little perch. And near that perch, we have a net that protects the kite and the owl from each other. And we sit very close by and watch the interaction. And we're within 200 meters or so from an active nest territory when they have chicks that are big. And so the kites, as they come and go to feed their chicks, spot the owl as a threat and then swoop at it to try to make it leave the area, get away from the chicks, and then hopefully swoop in the right direction and get stuck in the net. And we run out right there and get the kite and then the owl put away. So the threat is gone. They've done their duty and scared the owl away. And then we work the bird up right there. And I mentioned, taking our time and doing safe things with the bird as we put a transmitter on it, and then say, "Thank you, bird. You're taking one for the team, and we're going to learn a bunch from you. So thank you."
It occurred to me just now, putting a transmitter on, and yet you said some of those transmitters will last 6 or 7 years. Is there no problem with molt and new feathers coming in the wrong direction under the harness or anything like that?
That's a good question and a good concern, but we've watched these birds for that long, and we've had our eyes on them, and the few species we were able to catch, again, either on purpose or accident, swallowtail kites and these other species we study as well, you know, the strapping, oh, hey, I got it. I happen to have an example. So these are little transmitters ready to go on white ibis. Same size, same kind that we use now on swallowtail kites. But this is the strapping we use. It's tubular Teflon ribbon, real soft, non-abrasive, and you know it tucks right into the feathers, and the birds, you know, preen it in, and it sits right along, like crisscrosses across the body, and then it sits as a little backpack on the back. And the birds that we've caught in the past, that have had transmitters on for years, you know, show no abrasion. Uh, Everything looks really normal. And you know, it's preened along the body, and there's no depression or rubbing spots. So um, yeah, it's a nice material that is not going to degrade and fall apart, and also be comfortable for the bird. And so you know, it has enough room there for them to gain the fat that they do each year when they get ready for migration, and then but it's not too light once they lose that weight as well.
Super. Folks, any other questions? At this point, feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you have questions.
Tina, a couple of years ago, well, we kept going to these fields, these melon fields up near Wildwood, and sometimes there were 1,000 birds or 300, and then to my alarm, they they plowed under the melon fields and started building houses there. And I think I contacted you all at the time because I go, oh no, they're getting rid of the melon fields. Had you thought of buying those melon fields and just paying college students to maintain them?
I know.
Because it was just such a huge roost area at night. Anyway, I think I didn't see so many last year there.
Yeah, and you know, the melon field that's definitely a phenomenon that's happening in this section of the state. We had them near Gainesville as well, and you know, farmers get tax write-offs to grow crops, and often they don't have the money to pick them, and so these melon fields just go rotten, and then at some point they just plow them under. So at that time, it just so coincides with you know, what the kites need at that time, and fantastic insect diversity. A lot of this, like these same true bugs that are flying around, like that they just love and fatten up on. And you know, it's kind of like you know, we see this patchwork of different melon fields come blink on and blink off in areas. So I know, I just hope that the birds can keep finding these places. But I know, I mean, if it's gonna be turned into something other than agriculture, then it's a different issue. You know, if there's a development or something, but hopefully there will be enough fields that have melons here and there. But
yeah, the ones in
hard.
Wildwood were starting to be developed, developed
Yeah.
some of those fields. I go, oh,
Yeah.
it's terrible. Well, are swallowtail kites a protected species on eBird? Do you know, are they a protected species on eBird? Like the buntings are, they don't
No,
disclose their site.
just those large roost sites.
Mhm.
So you can see where other people are seeing kites for the most part. Yeah.
Great program. Thank you for all you do.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
Sure.
A question,
Go ahead.
do the kites mate for life?
You know, we say that they'll they'll mate with their former partner if it's convenient. So they do not they don't migrate together. They often don't spend their wintering areas might be completely different. And again, these are things that we know because of the radio tagging and tracking that we've done. So if they come back to the nesting area that was successful the prior year, and they both arrive relatively around the same time, I think they have a very good chance at mating and nesting together with each other. But you know, some nest sites are we also with our tracking data, like we found you know, a bird was tagged at one location and then moved to a nest a kilometer south, and but that nest that the bird was tagged at was still occupied. So you know, the birds, because they're in these nest neighborhoods, they find each other, they know where each other, all the other nests are. So I think, you know, in that race to get back to their nesting territories, it's kind of first come, first serve. If they, you know, start getting to the favorite places before other birds, they'll take over a nest site. So that, I mean, that's really interesting. You know, people, oh, my kites are back. They're, you know, I see them in the same tree, but so that nest is reused, but are they the same birds? That's something that would be really cool to learn a little bit more about.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Okay, Gina, thank you very, very much. This was great. I have some great comments, you know, wonderful program in the chat box. I will be in touch with you because Tampa Audubon, well, we have given some donations to ARCI in the past, but we always give our speakers $100 honorarium. So I will be asking you, I'll send you an email to get the name and address. It can be to you personally, it can be to any other bird-related organization that you would choose to nominate, but send me that and we'll get a check in the mail to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Sure.
Yes.
How much do the transmitters, how much do they cost? And how many do you need a year? Do you have
well,
to replace some every year?
I mean, it's as needed. So, you know, right now it's like specific organizations or locations may have interest in having a bird tagged within their area or property, like the National Wildlife Refuge or a wildlife management area. So we don't have a goal necessarily, like how many birds to tag. It's as needed as the interest is there. And I would have to look at the specifics on how much the transmitters, and then it's, you know, our time and the data collection is all different, but it's I'm going to throw out like $5,000 for tagging or for the transmitter, and then maybe some operation time on top of that. So but
Oh,
That's one of the ones that lasts for 7 years, maybe.
yeah, well, these new ones, so the 7-year one was a satellite transmitter, and those are actually even more expensive. So these newer ones, they're new to us as well. So we haven't had birds with them on more than 2 years. But and so their lifespan lifespan is most likely a little shorter, up to like 3 years. So they're less expensive, but you don't get that data as long either. So yeah, that's a trade-off.
Get what you pay for. All right,
Well, that's
folks.
a good idea. Yeah, idea.
Thank you all very, very much for participating this evening. Next month, our speaker is Marianne Corsi and Florida Scrub Jays. So we hope to see you then. As always, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have suggestions, send them in. And with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you, Gina, again.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Great.